We're going to get you to very quickly just introduce yourselves first. So we all know Hayley, but do it again if you like. Yes. How do you fit into our wonderful community? Welcome, Ben.
Kia ora. It's working then. Great. Kia ora, everybody. Ben Dakers. I'm an Associate Director at Datacom, which is a tech services company in New Zealand and Australia, if you don't know of it. And I guess, really quickly, my role in that and why I'm keen to be here is basically we try and look at everything our customers are telling us, good, the bad, etc., and fundamentally change those relationships we have in market and make, try and make sure we're more future relevant in what we do and how we work with all the organisation in New Zealand. And my other special passion on that side really is about what are we doing about talent and how we kind of changing the ways we work and collaborate with, academia, business around getting talent in new ways, because I think we'll get into that. But fundamentally, a few things have to change. So that's why I'm here today.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ben. Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Andrea Kolb. I'm a professional teaching fellow here at the University of Auckland in engineering. Hi, Gerard. That's my boss. It's a long title, professional teaching fellow. The only thing that I'm doing is teaching all day long, essentially. So this is how you can see me. I'm responsible, or I co-teach one of our first-year engineering students. This means there are huge logistics involved of more than 1,000 students. And then I also do a third-year engineering course in chemical and materials engineering, which is a little bit of my baby, and there I really can go into those real pedagogically informed tools that we have as pedagogues available, and there I can try out things. Everything that we heard so far really resonated with me, and there were so many elements I not only do myself, but also I can relate to, and I'm also very keen on trying out those things that I don't know yet. So, and then, Keith, do you want to?
I'm Craig. Nice to meet you all.
Welcome, welcome. Awesome. Well, we'll leave it, we'll start on this end. My first question for the panel actually comes from the floor. The kind gentleman, Dale, over there, reached out during the break and asked me to raise this, and I was thinking, well, that actually might be a really great place to start. And you probably need to brace yourselves now, okay? Because we're going to ask you to comment on something that's affecting the entire human race at the moment. Okay? So we know, start small, baby, yes. So as you know, the pandemic has sort of rolled through our population and it continues to ripple through. And it's really kind of in some ways dislodged us from normal, right? We've all kind of gone up in the air. We've done lockdowns, we've done remote working. So it's really kind of run this wave right through everything that we'd consider normal and stable and familiar 2 years ago, BC, before COVID, right? So yeah, I think we're curious about what's the new normal? What are the paradigms that are starting to take shape for our workplaces, for our students, for our education? So society, can we offer some commentary around what you're seeing as the new normal? Like, should we be looking out for that now? Is it too early to tell? Are we still in stasis? What are your thoughts on what you've experienced so far about what we can actually rely on, I guess, to grasp onto as the world's sort of changing shape around us? What are some of the things that we can actually hold on to that will give us some stability and security?
Well, we all were forced to become really flexible, right? Why should we give that away? Let's keep doing that.
Yep.
This was kind of a trend that was beginning before COVID, and it's kind of just been accentuated by forcing us to do it. There was a concept of flipped learning that's kind of been out for, I don't know, do you know how long? Yeah, long time, where instead of having the students come in and they sit down in front of you and just listen to you for an hour or so, you actually give them the content beforehand, and then you actually start doing more practical, hands-on activities during this time. So you're actually making more of a use of the time. It gives the students more flexibility. We had Cody talk about, they have to try and balance work versus study. So they can listen to a podcast of your teaching the content, say when they're on the train or the bus into their job. That gives them much more ability to adjust and be flexible with their own time. in terms of sort of what we've come back to, for example, in engineering, a lot of our stuff is very hands-on. And obviously being able to come back and actually do that with the students is kind of a great foundation for moving forward, but still having the flexibility that we can do a lot of the other things that, they don't need to actually sit there and listen to us talk to them on the stage, is giving them that flexibility to sort of balance out between the two different areas.
Thanks, Scott. I agree with that as well. I think obviously I speak more from an industry point of view than teaching, but I think it's kind of relevant to both. I think the change fundamentally, though, is people still looking for a lot of those similar things, right? Connection and collaboration, etc. But you just have to be way more purposeful about it now than we were before. We'd all talk about, the water cooler moments, culture, etc. would kind of happen, but now we're having to train leaders and our leaders to think, how do you purposely create that connection in a virtual world, right? How do you make sure there's that project purpose-based learning? It's not just going to happen on its own. So I think the skill that needs to change is actually people who teach or lead people, both of you are kind of responsible for people's, pastoral care, I guess, is that you've got to put more time and effort to making that happen. It doesn't happen on its own. So I think that's kind of, because I think the things haven't changed too much, but the way you do it's fundamentally different. So.
Definitely picking up on those innovative educational approaches and how you make the most of that time that people find, have very precious amounts of time to commit to learning. So all of our learners at MindLab and Tech Futures Lab work full-time. They are doing their study as part of their own personal and professional development. And so, as Craig mentioned, having alternative ways that are not them coming to class and sitting there and listening to us lecture them, so to speak, is really important. But I think one of the things that I've noticed over COVID is people's urge to learn. I think COVID gave a lot of people lots of shocks in more ways than one, more ways than we probably would have liked. And so people's urge to learn is only growing, and you saw that with the rise of online courses over COVID and everyone pivoting to put their material online. And so that momentum that's been gained, how do you keep hold of that momentum? Because lifelong learning is important. You don't have a career for life anymore. And so how do you kind of capture that motivation and that energy to learn whilst also acknowledging that the world is not normal and questioning what is normal, and how do we provide opportunities to learn that are flexible, that are personalised, that are relevant, that are applied, and that give people that opportunity to really kind of dive deep into what they're either personally or professionally passionate about in ways that are relevant. Because if it's relevant and it's enjoyable, then people are going to commit to it and put time into it.
Colart. Wow, that's a good first cut. As a follow-on question, how do educators in the education sector, how do you really dial in to what our workplaces actually need right now? So we've kind of all tuned into this sort of Victorian, complex that our kind of education system is based off a kind of Victorian factory model, and we're attempting to evolve that as much as we possibly can. Just any comments on how educators can really connect in with the actual needs and the actual realities that your students will face. And I think there's probably a clue in some of the project-based learning that you've been supporting, right?
Yeah, I guess just to kind of jump in, I think one of the things around that is I come from teaching at a postgraduate level, so it's kind of slightly different to teaching at an undergrad level, but acknowledging the experience and the mana and the expertise that those students bring from industry into the classroom, and teachers or educators not being the expert necessarily, and kind of disrupting some of those power hierarchies in the room, and giving students the opportunity to share their experiences. Our students often say, I learned a whole lot from my cohort, not just from you guys. And so how do you bring that industry when they're out there, even the engineering students who are doing their engineering work at the same time as studying, how do you capture that, and how do you use that in the classroom and give students that agency and that power to be the expert without that kind of transactional teacher as the expert, student as the learner, thinking about yourself as an educator, as a learner, as well as those learners that are in front of you, I think is important.
Nice. I love that distinction they give for TED speakers. You know, when you're training to be a TED talker, they often say, look, don't try and be the expert, try and be an expert. Because you are one of the 7 billion, right, on the planet, and you have a particular worldview. And so, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Sorry to steal this, but it was just to kind of riff on that a bit. And I know this is not the question was more about what can you do as, sorry, I'm losing my voice there, as educators. But I think looking at it from the industry side, though, I think to me it's a bit about preparing them for, it's going to be very different. I don't know if anyone here, I draw a lot of inspiration from Gary Bowles, right? He talks a lot about the new rules of work. Oh. And like, it's fascinating when you think like someone in my age group, where you might, go to uni, you'll be thinking about a job, you probably do something that pays, you might get into something you like, and then eventually you'll start doing, okay, what can I do that's, more purposeful, might be volunteering, making an impact, right? But you talk to people now, and we do a lot talking to, kids at high school and that, they're not looking for any of that, right? They want a portfolio of work, they want to be following their purpose and mission first, then they'll think about the skills they need to do that, and then they hope that someone will pay them, right? And that might be to go to university, or it might be apprenticeship. So I think when you think in that kind of angle, that they're not looking to have a job at one place, but they might want to work at 4 places that give them that purpose and have different outcomes. So what are you doing as educators to prepare them with the skills to work in that different world? And I think that's what we don't do enough of currently in industry, is really with experiments, so that we can foster that, right, through projects, through pieces. People can come and do a small piece. But I think that's the challenge, really. So academia, how do you prepare them for that? And how do we collaborate more so we prepare that space when people want something different?
How's that need get expressed more?
Oh my goodness, this is my moment.
There it is.
Thank you so much, Ben, for leading up. And it really ties in what Cody had said earlier about the vocational training, for example. Maybe I think it helps you to understand what my background is, to understand where I'm trying to go to. And as you can hear from my accent, I come from Germany, and I went through the German education system there. From the outside, the German education system looks really complex. What I understand in hindsight of having gone through it, it's very flexible. It really allows so many pathways to accommodate certain needs. So when I tell my students that I finished high school when I was 15 years old, they always think, oh my goodness, I must be super smart. Oh, no. I simply chose to stop learning at that moment because I had chosen a pathway out of like 5 different types of schools I could have chosen from when I was 10 years old, that allowed me to finish that particular type of school when I was 15. And then I went on to do an apprenticeship to become a chemical lab technician. I started it, I think it was just like 10 days before my 16th birthday or something like that. And how did I come along that job opportunity? I went with my mom to a shopping center. We bumped into a family friend, and this person said, hey, I'm doing this job. We are hiring next month. Maybe it's something for you. I applied and they took me. And then is when I really discovered, when I was really just 16 years old, how much I appreciate science. Because guess what? I actually went to a school where I learned all about accounting. Honestly, I had no idea, but this was the vocational training for. I went 3 years through this program, which is completely normal in Germany, where 3 days out of the week I worked in the company. I was working in that lab with already educated chemical lab technicians. They showed me how to do the experiments, what we need to do, how many samples a day we get in, what are the different analyses we have to do, how we report back, how we can release actually the product to the market, ensure quality, right? So that not one of the customers would come back and say, look, I didn't know. Today we would have some sort of social media response to it where 2,000 people respond to, never buy again this product again, right? So this type of thing. And the other 2 days of the week, I went to a school where it was only for chemical lab technicians and where we studied the science behind the experiments that I did every day in the lab. So then when I was, 20 years old or so. I finished that and just continued working in that role because that company had invested in me 3 years of becoming the next lab technician, 1 out of 20 who was there, right? And we had to do job rotation because the lab never could shut down. We always had to assure quality of the products that were produced in that company with over 800 people employed there. I was doing that. At some stage, I chatted with my boss about it. Oh, I think my direct boss was actually away restructured, let's say. So I had the chance to get to know my above boss. And then I asked him, hey, what do I have to do a leadership role like you have? And he told me, you have to go to university. And I'm like, I knew that answer, so it's really bold in hindsight. I think it happens to you when you're just in your early 20s. I actually had already prepared my letter of resignation and gave it to him. Thank you so much for reassuring me. So, but at this stage, I wasn't allowed actually to go to university, right? I mean, somebody who just 15 finished school at the time, obviously I didn't have the study skills and the basics that I needed to study engineering. Okay, looking at the German education system, what do I have to do to fill that gap? Ooh, I go to the local school. I can do 1 year, or it's like a pressure test, or 2 years, and then I am allowed to go to the university. I did that 1 year, kind of nearly died because this was this was extreme mathematics and physics all in one year. Chemistry that I was kind of good at because of my apprenticeship wasn't really part of the curriculum, so I did it. All what I had to do was survive. And then I decided to go to this University of Applied Sciences, which turned out was kind of my hometown. Hey, I had done this Excel spreadsheet of pros and cons of which would be the best university I should go to get this role my former manager had in, right? So turned out I wanted to go to my local university then, because they had the most appropriate program for me. I joined them. We called it Applied Chemistry at the time. In the meantime, it has been renamed. And what I found out is all of my lecturers there, they were called professors, right? But all of them had to have industry experience. Research was not a big thing for them, but they always did industry projects. And I felt very at home with them, just at the way how we talked and how they became my role models. I went through that program for 4 years. 2 years in, I came to New Zealand for the first time to do an internship in research at Vic in Wellington. And my heart totally got attached to science then. So after finishing my degree in Germany, and some work experience with Siemens along the line, right? I came to Wellington to do a PhD in chemistry, and I never ever thought about the job my earlier line manager had, because I'm far superior now with that.
Oh, nicely done.
Quickly saying, so I had this industry experience, and while I was studying, yes, I had a couple of requirements, and that ties in with what Cody had said. Too busy working to study. Wasn't a problem for me because, first of all, the education system in Germany is for free. So honestly, I went through that extremely difficult process of 4 years of higher education studies. And nobody forced me to go there. I even didn't pay for it, nothing. I just went there because I wanted to become an engineer. And it was an entry requirement to the program of having done an internship in the industry before, which I found extremely valuable when I met my fellow students who hadn't done an internship or a apprenticeship like I had done before. They were often quite lost. So I showed them in the lab of how to do the things, right? And with that internship, I think it set already the bar of who should be there. Should I finish?
Well,
Should I finish?
maybe we could get you to tighten up.
Yeah.
What I heard in there was lots of industry. You crossed the borders quite often.
Yes.
You went in and spent time in industry. You then went back into education, and you kept going backwards and forwards, and you sort of accumulated this sort of hybrid. You got the best of both worlds, a yin and yang, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah. So is that? I mean, the original question that sparked this was, how does the education sector get connected to industry and really properly hear and listen to them? And how does the industry, and to Ben's point, express the actual needs? These are the kind of people that we need to be bringing into our workforce and into our work environments.
I answered that by saying that as a student, I worked for Siemens, but only during my semester breaks, every winter and every summer for 2 months straight, and my boss made a point of not employing me while I had the semester coursework going on.
Just some separation.
Yes,
Awesome.
this was their point really. They wanted me to finish my degree, and they offered me a job afterwards. But then, hey, I came to New Zealand for the PhD.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Thank you for that, Andrea. I think it's actually a good opportunity to take a couple of questions from the floor. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Masoud.
Kia ora. Thank you, all the panellists and speakers. There are a few of us here tonight from Unitec, where we work in education and training. And in particular, 3 of us here are from the School of Creative Industries. So we work heavily in project-based learning, hands-on learning. Less so in work-based, because of course we don't really have an organised industry. And so I'm really interested to hear from the panellists what your response is to the problem. What do you think is the solution to the problem of post-pandemic, or still being with the pandemic? We understand that equity, deep citizenship, whole of person approach, education and training going hand in hand with wellness, te whare tapawhara, if you like, the house of the whole person. How do we approach that with industry? Because education is a learnt skill set. Education is an art form in itself. And there is surely a real skill to the crossover between education in a formalised structure, whether that's university, polytech, PTE, whatever, and work-based learning, if there is an industry which is organised and has such a thing as an HR department and what have you. I mean, in our sector, it's also most often freelancers and independent work makers.
Like collaborations.
Yeah, and so I realise that we're talking about engineering tonight and an organised system of work in that, quite particular definition of it. But I really, I worry about the statement that was made earlier that work-based learning is rapid and low-cost education. And I really want to ask the panellists how we make it authentic. And low cost might be attractive, but surely we need to have more deep and whole of person, and therefore more time intensive. Because aren't we talking about apprenticeships?
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about? And how do we approach that, particularly for work, for industries which are less organised and neoliberal in their structure?
Thank you for that.
Definitely a big, wide question there. So obviously we have the advantage in engineering that we do have a pretty strict structure that we have to follow, and that does tend to simplify things. Of course, it comes at some other costs. We don't have as much individuality. We don't, have as wide a range. I was talking with Hayley earlier about how do we scale up, having every student having their own option. I know here at the university we also have a similar creative arts and industries, and that does tend to be a lot more of the apprenticeship model, where the students they have a combination of both courses where they learn sort of the theory and the background, and then they also do a lot of project-based work with mentors that sort of help guide them through the process over the period of their degree. it doesn't quite answer what you're asking, because the actual mentors are still academics who have worked in the university and have gone through that process. So I'm not sure how an industry like yours could quite actually get out as much with the people and potentially, I don't know, either bring them into the university or get the students out into their workplaces to try and give them that background experience in there. I think the closest that we get to it is we're trying to teach them a whole lot of skills, not just the technical skills, but the other skills that help them to learn and grow and pick up new things over time, so that, and I'm going to say in theory here, so that when they actually get out into the industry and try and work in that area, they've got the other skills to help that lifelong learning that they need over time.
Maybe just something to add. It's more of a question that you can ponder about. What about setting up a practice company within your institution? And this is there to teach the student or give the students an environment where they can study. I did it in high school, and what we were selling was mineral water. But it gave me all the accounting skills that I wanted to practice.
Yeah, and a lot of questions. I won't try and touch on it. It's very broad, but I think there's a little bit to me that was quite interesting, because I think, especially when you talk about that creativity side, right? When I think, say, us, a tech company, a lot of people would say, oh, is it developers and people who manage widgets and connect sprockets? But we actually have a whole suite of people that do design, right? They're artists, they create stuff. So there's actually a massive connection in loads of industries for your particular, that kind of sphere, right? Which people don't make the initial connection that's actually a skill set and a mindset everyone is looking for, right? And, there's some big organisation, won't name, that their whole business now is getting run by a designer, right? Coming out with a design mindset when they're looking at HR or how they do their digital or whatever. So I think that's a really good shift, to be honest, because that creativity. But I think when you talk about how to build something there, I think that, through it quickly, there's some sweeping, and this is a very sweeping generalisation. We often think, academia, that side kind of misses here. You churn out all these people that are all green behind the ears and not ready, and we're like, oh, you can't even run a meeting, and they're like, no, I want to be doing purposeful work, but you get me doing low-end stuff. So it's about immediately having that. So I think there's somewhere that we have to collaborate more in the middle, because you naturally need that research academic angle to challenge what we do in business, right? You've got to challenge the models. Just because we've been running a framework that McKinsey came up with 30 years ago doesn't mean it's right anymore. And, academia has to challenge that. But equally, we need to find more space in the middle where you're coming out with some of those skills that are more relevant quickly, and we're offering those ones who say you can start. I agree with apprenticeships, by the way. Massive gap in the tech industry. We don't have it. Not many companies offer it.
It's a lot more informal.
I lived in London a long time. Tech apprenticeships are huge. We got them in. Whenever you speak to students, young high school students now, everyone asks me when we have these kind of tech events, how do I get an apprenticeship? They don't want to go to university. Sweeping generalisation again. Lots of them do, of course, but a lot want that pathway. So I think, to be honest, the answer is actually it's better collaboration and better partnership, and not. We tend to often look at each other and go, oh, they're not delivering what we need in business. And academia is like, no, you're not listening, and we've got to do it this way. So we have to kind of break that a bit, I think, and actually say, how do you collaborate in the middle? And that's both of us changing, but you have to kind of embed that in a framework and not just this is some nice words and we'll do that. You've got to embed it. So take 2 or 3 things and try and change it. No, I think I'm trying to pursue some of that myself with some tertiary institutes at the moment, but how do we have a partnership framework to change how we pull talent and what we offer back?
And get organised.
But there's many things you asked, so I don't want to take too long, but I think there's a couple there. I think it's collaboration. I think it's agreeing to change together to look at a bit of that, from my view.
Awesome. I think we'll take one more question from the floor, and then I think we'll start to wrap up.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, you really pressed my button. So I want to respond, and Ben, you part answered it. So I want to preface my question by observing that graduates from vocational education have a far higher employment rate than graduates from universities. So I'm just going to put that to one side for a moment. If we agree, and we might not, but if we agree that contemporary real-world assessment, in other words, if we create IBL or PBL programs, and I'm talking about the overlap between those two, if we agree that assessment in that space is about contemporary real-world problems that don't yet have a solution, then presumably we agree that there's no correct answer to base our rubric on, which presumably means that we need to move beyond sort of theoretical construct rubrics for assessment and bring industry into the way that we assess success. And if we do agree with that, then I'm curious about your solution to how we assess graduates of the future, and I'm particularly curious as to how you would equate a university-based education as being superior, as I think you do, to a vocational-based education. So we're at that point of the evening, right? It's warming up in here. I just thought I'd end it on that note. And by the way, it's a genuine question because I don't know the answer to that.
I think in many ways our society has changed, so they think that a university education is the penultimate education. I disagree. You look back in history, it was more apprenticeship-based, it was more trades-based, where you would go and learn along the way. But at some point we changed our educational culture to saying, you need to go to education, you need to go to university to get a decent education, to get a decent job. Yeah, elitist, exactly.
It's the innie voice versus outie voice.
I've been to both. I originally went to a polytechnic because I went to university and I failed it. Because I was told I had to go to university to do it. There is a group of people who want to go to university because, like Andrea, they see the skills and the benefit that brings to them, and that's what they want to do. Other people, you can get it just as well going to a polytechnic or getting an apprenticeship-based model. So we shouldn't be encouraging everybody to try and do a university-based education.
One size does not fit all.
Exactly. We need to be looking at how we can have different educational models that would bring up different opportunities for everybody. Yeah, so, all right, I'm not going to talk anymore. I disagree that we should all go to university. I think vocational training is just as good, and it will help I think a certain number of our students who come to university should not. They should go get on the job training. Andrea?
I think there are many things I can add. It would take too much time, so I'm not doing it. One thing, perhaps we can get a little bit more comfortable with the idea that the university is not industry and industry is not university. Some things just, we can't find the overlap, and everybody should try to focus on collaboration, of trying to close the gap. This is probably the best at this stage what we can try to work towards, and it's also a SMART goal, it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, and so on. So at this stage, as long as the funding in New Zealand looks like the one we have at the moment, it is very difficult to change the system. I can say that all of the colleagues I'm working with directly, we have a strong focus and commitment of preparing our students for the workplace challenges that are out there.
Awesome.
I guess it raises a bunch of interesting questions for me in terms of, what is the value of education? Kind of going super philosophical, but not that there is an answer to that question, but also the, hierarchies within education and hierarchies of knowledge which seem to privilege some forms of education over others which are not necessarily what the student needs, what the organisation needs or what the industry needs. And so I think, you know, a lot of what we try to do and what I try to do, which is not what I ever thought I would be doing, having come out of a geography department, is to kind of think about how does the education system privilege some groups or ways of being or ways of knowing or ways of doing, and how can we disrupt that privilege to be able to provide more authentic learning experiences. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be within a university or even be within a classroom of some form. And, you know, what is the value of things like apprenticeships? And they are seen as less than, if you have an apprenticeship, some people will think that is less than having a degree. But actually, what is the value that you hold of that as a person, but what is the value of the industry? Or what is the industry value in terms of what is necessary to move forward and to build those kind of, you know, resilience is one of those buzzwords that's going around at the moment, coming out of COVID. How do you build resilient systems? And how do you navigate change, and how do you, you know, overcome and enable people to be able to overcome change? And education is a big part of that, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be formal education. I mean, we have many a student who I have supervised who have never done university education before. And they come and they do our master's degree. They come in with their equivalent experience, which is, if not more valuable than the students who come in with an academic kind of qualification background. And they thrive. They're actually the students who thrive because they are not in the position of having to unlearn a whole lot of things that they learnt in their university days, which might be holding them back or might be barriers to them moving forward. And so that unlearning process makes people feel uncomfortable because you're taking them outside of what they know and what apparently is the right thing to do. But they see the value in it when you get to the end, and the thing that they produce or the thing that they create is something that they take forward beyond their master's or their postgrad certificate or their micro-credential to be of value, to be implemented in their organisation and community. And that's where that authentic, I guess, value on education can lie when it's not confined.
Kia ora. Awesome. I think on that note, we're going to wrap up. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please put your hands together for our amazing panel? Thank you so much.